Hello and welcome to another countdown. Wait, this isn't a countdown, at least not in the traditional sense. So I saw a bunch of music fans on the internet attempt the challenge of picking their favorite albums from every year they've been alive, which is a cool idea, and I thought it would be interesting if I applied that kind of concept to my own YouTube channel. But there were a few problems. First of all, I'm not a music channel, and I don't really have any interest in being one. But one thing I am is a video game channel. I've played a decent amount of video games, enough to have a decent pick for all the years I've been alive, so I've decided to try and do a video like that. So today I'm talking about my favorite game from every year from 2001 to 2020. I'm not forcing myself to follow any form of franchise or genre restriction, so apologies in advance if there are a few, well, repeated offenders here. I'm also basing this list off of the original release date of the game, which was kind of annoying, but I felt like I needed some form of standardization. So a lot of games were considered for a year separate from their North American release date. This will probably explain why a game you swore came out in 2013 or something might be in the 2012 slot, for example. The year 2001 is honestly super ripe with fantastic games. It was a bit overwhelming. Being the year the Nintendo GameCube came out certainly gave it an advantage. Games like Conker's Bad Fur Day, Luigi's Mansion, and Super Smash Bros. Melee were all considered. But my favorite game from 2001 is not any of these. It's not even a console game. It was a Japanese exclusive on the Game Boy Advance for like 5 years and was released years later on the DS in my country. Phoenix Wright Ace Attorney is a really small game when compared to some of the other games that I liked from this year. But what gives it the extra edge is how ahead of its time it was for both mystery games and visual novels. Phoenix Wright is a 24-year-old man who has just become a defense attorney. This is a game about a defense attorney, which might sound really boring to you at first. Thankfully, unlike our lame real-life legal system, where the job of criminal defense attorneys usually is dedicated to helping people reduce charges or be legally classified as insane, the legal system in Ace Attorney is much more corrupt, and when a murder occurs, they will usually just arrest the first guy they see near the crime scene, and because of that, Phoenix has a lot more people who are completely innocent to defend. When thinking about my favorite game from this series, for the longest time I considered the third game to be my favorite, but honestly on repeated playthroughs I always find myself binging and loving the original game more than the third. The third probably has a more complex story, but the first just has the advantage of being more self-contained, and that gives it an edge. My favorite game from 2002 is probably Super Mario Sunshine. Mario Sunshine, like a lot of GameCube games, takes the formula from predecessors in the series and tries to add a weird twist to spice things up. Mario in this game goes to a tropical resort and gets a weird talking hose backpack to help him clean up mud all over the place. I've talked about this game a few times before, and my opinion on it has pretty much stayed the same. It's probably one of my lesser favorite 3D Mario games, but I admire it for its creativity and willingness to take risks. Flood was a bold addition to the game, and he certainly wasn't perfect, but he also certainly wasn't bad. There are a lot of new interesting tricks and techniques unique to this game thanks to him, and there's a high skill ceiling for those who want to push it to its limits. My favorite game from 2003 is Fire Emblem Blazing Sword, or just plain Fire Emblem, which was its name in the North American release. I think Nintendo has renamed it Blazing Blade as its official English name, but I can't grow accustomed to it. I'm a Blazing Sword guy through and through. Blazing Sword is probably my favorite Fire Emblem game, albeit not for any really interesting reasons. It's just easy to pick up but challenging later on, has a great set of protagonists, and has some great map design. I really like how the main leg of the game can be experienced in multiple ways, either through the eyes of Eliwood or Hector, and there are minor differences throughout based on that. I always am a sucker for that kind of stuff. The game is a prequel that takes place around 20 years before Fire Emblem Binding Blade, the one with Roy. Because of this, some of the cast members are in fact younger versions of characters from that game, and that's always something I like to see. Elib is a really good continent, and seeing how it was 20 years before is actually really cool. 2004 had me a bit torn. I mentioned earlier that I go back and forth between the first and third Ace Attorney being my favorite in the series, and I seriously considered Ace Attorney 3 for this spot. That game has Godo, and Godo is freaking awesome and the #1 coffee addict in gaming. But there's also the game that made me fall in love with RPGs. I was probably 9 or 10 when I first played Paper Mario The Thousand Year Door. I'd played Super Paper Mario before, and I loved that game. But a lot of people online told me that this game was better. So I was excited. And even while I was expecting a fun game, I was very pleasantly surprised with how great this game really was. It's the perfect mix of a lovable cast, a super fun battle system, fantastic art direction, hilarious dialogue, and a story that isn't too serious but is certainly competent and engaging. It's been years since I played it, and upon playing some of it again after all these years, I'm super happy to see that it's held up fantastically. It might be even better than I remember by some measures. I certainly find the dialogue funnier now that I'm a bit older. Rogueport is an awesome hub world with a sweet pirate theme and aesthetic. I also think the 2.5 dimension art style and set design is so well done and lends itself to secrets really well. If I ever made a role-playing game, I'd probably want to do something similar to this. I originally meant to play just a bit to refresh my memory to write this script, but I ended up playing the entire first chapter because the game is just that fun. Actually, another update, I started writing this part of the video on a Monday, and by Thursday night, I had replayed the entire game. It's super great. As time had passed, I think my perception of the game got worse as my good memories surrounding it faded, but now that it's fresh in my mind, all the doubt I had is gone. This game is a masterpiece. It's a shame they decided to take such a weird direction with Paper Mario after the third game. I still don't know why. Do people even buy the newer games? Whatever. This one is still great. 2005 wasn't a year with a lot of standout games for me personally. I had a bit of trouble picking a game for this spot on the list. I even considered Club Penguin, because it officially became a thing in 2005, but that's not really a game I enjoy for the same reasons as other games on this list. But at least we have Fire Emblem. Fire Emblem Path of Radiance was the first Fire Emblem game on a home console that was released in the West, and for a lot of people, it reached a level of cinematics we weren't able to really enjoy on the Game Boy Advance. The game stars Ike, who interestingly is not royalty unlike pretty much every other Fire Emblem protagonist. Ike and his friends navigate a world which is a lot more morally gray than most other Fire Emblems, and the game's story and characters are some of its best assets. The game has a well-made combat system with a plethora of fun maps and interesting gimmicks, even among other Fire Emblem games. It's definitely one of my favorites in the series. I knew the game I'd pick for 2006 the moment I first thought of this list. It's obviously Mother 3. Mother 3 is a legitimate masterpiece. Originally developed with the Nintendo 64 in mind, Mother 3 evolved into a project to be worked on for the Game Boy Advance. And thank God it did, because the pixels on the GBA are a lot kinder to the series' cartoony art style than the Nintendo 64 was. Yeesh. The game's protagonist is Lucas, but you don't actually play as him until after you've progressed through the first couple chapters. The story and characters play a much more active role here than they do in Earthbound, and that really gives the game a special edge for me. The game still keeps the series' lovely sense of humor, but definitely tells a tale that takes itself a lot more seriously. And without spoiling anything, it gets pretty heavy. It's been said by many a mediocre Nintendo YouTuber, but it really is a shame that they never decided to give Mother 3 an official Western release. I'm pretty sure the people who did the fan translation literally made it clear that if Nintendo ever wanted to, they were perfectly welcome to use their translation in a Western release, but still nothing. It might have something to do with their professionalism or something. I don't really know. I'm way past caring though. I first played this game when I was like 8. I've watched my share of fan-made documentaries about the elusive Mother 3 and the dedicated fan effort to get the game a Western release. I don't think it will ever happen. Who knows though? The series is certainly more popular today than it was 10 years ago. I can't keep up with the fanbase anymore. Sorry, I'm kind of a Mother fanbase old head. I'd like to formally apologize to all the non-man children in the audience who play games made for adults, because I'm certainly not talking a lot about their kind of content right now. But at least my favorite game from 2007 was not a Nintendo game, and it's not like there was no competition. Releasing Mario Galaxy and Super Paper Mario in 1 year is hard to beat, but 2007 also has Team Fortress 2, and I spent too many hours of my life playing that game to neglect it. Even with its, rocky is understating, terrible update and maintenance schedule, Team Fortress 2 is still a great game at its core. I'm sure you've all heard this before. The game's characters, maps, community, world, and gameplay all come together to make a hilariously lovable class shooter that you've probably played before if you have Steam. Even with the bots and the fact that there hasn't been any new weapons in years, I still find myself coming back again and again to this game, and that is very impressive. Super Smash Bros. Brawl gets a lot of hate, and it's not hard to see why. The game essentially took everything that made Melee's physics great and used it as guidance on what not to do. It's certainly not a game that had a long shelf life for competitive players. But I'll be damned if we ever get a single-player campaign in the series as fantastic as Subspace Emissary. The game has a really great selection of single-player content in general. There's a ton of stuff to do outside of just the main brawl. This is probably the most packed game in the series if you can only play on your own. I'm certainly pretty partial to it given it was my first Smash Bros, but still, it's a good time, and it has things you can't get from any other game. It also has one of the best sets of newcomers, and probably my favorite soundtrack in the series. And I'm only really talking about this game as a Smash Bros game. For video games as a whole, it's really hard for any other franchise to beat Smash Bros in terms of significance and quality for me. I don't really know how much I've really shilled for my favorite game from 2009, but regardless, it probably wasn't enough, because after playing it again, I've only become more convinced that 999 is in serious consideration for the greatest visual novel of all time. The story of this thing is just, man, I don't know, badass? A bunch of strangers on a sinking ship forced to solve a bunch of puzzles before they drown? That's pretty sweet. It's also extra sweet when you first realize that things on this ship are a lot more complicated than just that concept alone, and that some of the people on this cursed cruise vacation might not have the best intentions. I love the game and I will never stop shilling for it. It's a masterpiece and it makes me love video games more. There were a lot of games that I was considering for this spot. 2010 was a great year with a lot of games I loved. It was hard picking my favorite. I really spent hours and hours trying to pick one standout game. It's Xenoblade Chronicles. Xenoblade Chronicles is my favorite role-playing game of the 2010s, and my recent playthrough of the game on the new Definitive Edition on the Switch has pretty much reinforced that. Yeah, this game is pretty much the best thing ever. It's funny how different it is to play nowadays, mostly because of how my experience with video games has evolved. I remember how long this game felt as a kid. It took me like 80 hours the first time through, and when it finally finished, I was like conflicted at adjusting to a world without it. I know that sounds kind of stupid, but the game just seems so large to me that the concept of it even ending almost seemed impossible. The story and writing is phenomenal. It really is. The punch hasn't gone away, and the sheer grandeur of the story never wears off for me. There are so many fantastic twists and turns that if you go into this game with no prior knowledge, which you should, you'll be constantly having your mind blown. Just play it. The story of Minecraft is honestly a really inspiring one. The fact that one of the biggest video games ever made literally in all of history started out as an independent project of some Swedish person on his computer messing around in Java makes me want to sit down and think, maybe there's a chance. If you're somehow not familiar with Minecraft, it's a pretty simple premise for a game. It's a sandbox taken to its logical extreme, a world you can build in where the only true limit is your imagination, and the 256 meter high y-axis block limit, but the point still stands. I started playing this game a few months before it had its official release in November of 2011, and since then the game has only gotten bigger and bigger. Minecraft has become much more than a game over time. It's a cultural juggernaut that literally everyone knows and has impacted parts of life beyond just video games, and that's a high honor. Now, 2012, this was a hard year to pick a favorite game from. There were a lot of fantastic video games that came out this year that I love quite a bit, and the final two games I was really considering were Kid Icarus Uprising and Animal Crossing New Leaf, and it hurt to pick my favorite of these two, but it had to be done. And for me personally, Animal Crossing New Leaf is just the kind of game that matches my tastes basically perfectly. I can never get enough of life simulation games like this, especially when they have cute animal characters for me to look at and talk to. For its time, the customization in this game was unmatched for the series. You had so much control of your town's infrastructure and government as mayor, along with so many options inside and outside of your home, that every single person's town had its own unique flavor. It was just so much fun. And although I love a lot of other games from this year, none quite became a part of my life in the same way Animal Crossing did. 2013 wasn't a year that stood out as much as the year that came before it, but it still had its share of great video games. And my favorite from this year was Phoenix Wright Ace Attorney Dual Destinies. Ace Attorney kind of had a bit of an identity crisis during its DS era. The Miles Edgeworth spin-offs were fine, but when they decided to give the series a several-year time skip where Phoenix accidentally submits counterfeit evidence in a case and loses his attorney's badge and becomes a shady homeless weirdo who acts as a sarcastic mentor figure to a new protagonist, well, it certainly wasn't a decision everyone was keen on. Dual Destinies tried to find a way to make the newly established post-time skip Ace Attorney world go back on track with Phoenix returning to law with the help of Apollo and a new character, Athena. And for the most part, it takes the story into a good direction. The transition to 3D is actually pretty good, and the new gameplay mechanics are interesting. The story was really great, and it has a really badass final case. I like it a lot, and I'm happy that it made Phoenix Wright act in character again, even if the transition back was a bit jarring. A common pattern in this video is that if a Smash Bros game comes out, it's probably going to be my favorite game of that year. It's predictable, but man, can you really blame me? Smash Bros is like a worldwide event. Everyone is in on the hype when a new one is coming out. Smash 4 had some awesome newcomers to the series, including characters like Mega Man, Little Mac, and eventually Bayonetta as DLC. It looked fantastic, and even came with beautiful cinematic trailers that spiked up everyone's hype for the game. The combat has been surpassed by Ultimate, but it was certainly a great improvement from Brawl. After great deliberation, Sakurai in all his wisdom decided that randomly tripping while moving was not a good idea for a fighting game. Brilliant. The game is great, but we all know that. 2015 was not a highlight year for Nintendo, at least for me. There weren't really any major releases from them, so I spent a lot of this year playing games not by them. And there was a small little indie game that came out this year that ended up being a worldwide phenomenon and stuff. Undertale pretty much made me rethink my love for video games. It's a game that is on one hand minimalist, with very basic sprites and graphics, and on the other hand a total overwhelming nightmare where you fight some demonic flower monster that uses stock images for its sprites. I usually have a distaste for metafiction, because I feel like it's so often done poorly and for cheap thrills, but in Undertale, the story is just done so well that I can't help but adore it. You know, it's kind of insane how with over 7 years of playing Team Fortress 2, I haven't even hit 1,000 hours. Especially when it only took me a year to get 1,000 hours of Sid Meier's Civilization 6. It's not even like a game I hold some sort of deep emotional bond with. It's just a strategy game that I never get bored of. See, the thing is, I kind of have a simplistic monkey brain, and I can be very easily entertained with properly timed stimuli. If you don't stimulate my minuscule animal brain enough, I will get bored and want to play something else. If you stimulate it too much, I'll get overwhelmed with everything that's going on and want to play something else. Sid Meier's Civilization finds itself right in the sweet spot, where I get the satisfaction of seeing my empire grow and expand, while also being able to enjoy the game at my own pace and zone out. It also is a game that really appeals to my interest in human history and geography. Seeing all sorts of famous political figures be reimagined as these silly cartoon characters is really entertaining. I know some people prefer the more realistic designs of the past, but I honestly really like Civilization 6 art direction. Nintendo pretty much went sicko mode on our poor wallets in 2017. The Switch released that year, and Nintendo went all out with some of the most imaginative games in both of some of their biggest series. Breath of the Wild and Super Mario Odyssey in the same year is absolutely crazy. And if you've seen some of the older content on this channel, you know which one I prefer. Mario Odyssey is in the market for my favorite Mario game. Period. It is such a fantastic revival of the older exploration-based 3D Mario games, and introduces some new ideas that give it charm all its own. It's a masterpiece for sure. I love the hat gimmick in general. Cappy is great, especially how people who wear hats are given protection from Mario possessing them, but occasionally you'll find some rando without a hat and find out Mario can take over their body. It's really funny and really cute. It's a game oozing with personality, and I love it. My favorite game of 2018 is Super Smash Bros. Ultimate. This isn't a surprise. Smash has been on this list a lot, and maybe some of you are unhappy with that, but can you really blame me? It's such an iconic game that brings so many iconic characters and worlds together that it's always a big deal for everyone. Ultimate is special because it took the special effort to bring back literally every Smash Bros. Character ever, and it made a big deal out of it. With good newcomers and great DLC, we have what is a legendary roster. It also has some of the best new combat in the series, rivaling Melee for a lot of people. So yeah, I love it. We're going into games I've publicly talked about as we near the end of the video, but whatever. My favorite game of 2019 is Fire Emblem Three Houses. Three Houses takes the Fire Emblem formula and turns it up to a scale that we've pretty much never seen. Being entirely voice acted with hundreds of hours of gameplay, it's without a doubt the most ambitious game in the series to date. It's also one of the most well written. Fire Emblem has had its share of morally gray stories, but this one really does a great job of making a world where the good and bad guys are hard to tell apart, and picking your house is harder than you might think. Fire Emblem as a franchise definitely had a bit of an identity crisis after the 3DS games. With a split fanbase who all like the series for very different reasons, Three Houses did a fantastic job at making a game with something for everyone. I'm really looking forward to seeing where the series heads in the future. Last but not least, my favorite game of 2020 is Animal Crossing New Horizons. We've waited so long for the next game in the Animal Crossing series, and New Horizons is a welcome addition for sure. I was a bit sad about the cut content from New Leaf at first, but with monthly updates since March, the game has been adding all sorts of awesome new features, and my old complaints of all the cut characters and stuff are quickly becoming outdated, which is awesome. It's easily the most customizable game in the series, and the level of creativity you can see among its community is hard to match. So yeah, that was the list of my favorite games from every year I've been alive. Thanks for watching. If you have any recommendations for games you think I missed out, don't be afraid to let me know. I'll see you all around.